Scratches are just a normal part of wearing a watch. I'm fairly careful with my watches and I don't abuse them, but there's no avoiding picking up a few superficial scratches here and there. I tend to get them on the clasp when I'm desk diving, and then I get occasional scratches on the bracelet that I can't quite explain. And the polished center links are notorious for picking up scratches. I don't get upset whenever I discover a new scratch on a new watch, and I don't expect it to stay in new condition forever. But all things being equal, I would prefer no scratch over a scratch. I've mentioned before how I occasionally used a nail buffer to remove scratches from a breast bracelet, or I used a Cape Cod polishing cloth to remove scratches from a polished surface. But whenever I bring this up, there's always someone in the comments that gets very angry. I never quite understood it, but it's like I broke some law or committed some sacrilege, and I should never treat a Rolex that way. I've had this Datejust for over a year, and I picked up some scratches on the clasp and the 6 o'clock side of the bracelet, especially the first two links on the polished surfaces. On the clasp, there's a large gash in the center and a few peripheral micro scratches. Here on the 12 o'clock side of the bracelet, everything looks fine. I don't see any scratches, even with magnification. These macro shots can tend to exaggerate the degree of scratching, but in real life they're not as noticeable and only visible at certain angles or with certain reflections of the light. So I brought out my Cape Cod polishing cloth and tried to fix these areas. I taped off the brush surfaces on the sides and just rubbed in the cloth into the scratches on the first two center links. I removed the excess polish with the paper towel and buffed it with a microfiber cloth and repeated. Granted, there's some people that say you should never polish a watch, period. That's a valid viewpoint. All the scratches will give it some character, and over polishing will distort the lugs and the symmetry of the watch. Then there's other people that think it's fine to polish, but you should send it off to a professional and never do anything yourself. But my feeling is that these are my watches and I can do whatever I want to them. And if you're careful, it's perfectly safe to remove superficial scratches at home without damaging the watch. Especially if there are only one or two spots, I'd rather work on it myself instead of sending it in for service, where I tend to lose control of it and risk them polishing the whole watch unnecessarily and end up over polishing it. And then I taped off the clasp except for the center area where the major scratch is, and I worked on that. Final results, I think there was partial improvement on the bracelet scratches. The scratches are less visible at most angles now, but looking closely on macro at a certain angle, I can still see the scratches are still there. But in real life, at the normal distances, I don't really see them anymore. The clasp had better results. The large scratch in the center looks completely gone, but there still are some micro scratches at the edges where I didn't apply the polish. I think the clasp worked better because it was a broader surface and I was able to work in the polish better, but the bracelet links were smaller and more difficult to work with. So overall, I think the Cape Cod polishing cloth works fairly well on polished link surfaces. It just depends on how much pressure you apply and how long you work at it. In my case, I did a fairly light polish, and under magnification, the scratches look partially improved, and I don't see any visible damage at all. But to the naked eye at normal distances, I don't see those major scratches that I could see before.